So when people think of champagne, it's usually as a variation on a theme of these three main grape varieties that follow this kind of prohibitive and restrictive traditional method winemaking. And while that is largely true, there are also producers who are pushing the boundaries beyond those constraints to create wines that are unique and interesting and innovative. And so in this video, I'm going to show you three wines that represent those frontiers of champagne winemaking and demonstrate how the best wine regions in the world, well, they never stay still for long. So there are 5 big trends that I want to talk about in this video. And first up, it's the growing importance of low intervention and sustainable winemaking. So sustainability first. There are today over 8% of Champagne's vineyards are certified organic, which on the face of it is not really that impressive when you think Provence has probably got over a third of its vineyards organic. But if you put that in kind of historical context, Champagne traditionally has been one of the most chemically intensive wine regions in the world. It's not an easy place to do organic viticulture. It's cold and it's wet and it's difficult. So seeing that trend is actually really, really positive. The other really positive thing is that the charge for that is being led by some of the really big name producers. So people like Perpetual or Mum, who are both doing amazing things with regenerative viticulture. So it's actually a really, really positive sign. Now that's one thing. The other part of that is lower intervention winemaking. Now it's not easy to do that with champagne because it is by definition, the traditional method process is quite high intervention and it's quite technical. You need to kind of exert control at various points in that process if you're going to create a wine that is coherent and successful. So it's not easy to do. It's maybe not as important here as it is in other regions of the world, but it is increasingly important. And so you get producers now who are doing things like spontaneous fermentation, low sulfur usage, zero dosage, these kinds of things. So that's the first trend. Second thing is grape varieties. So we always think of Champagne as being a blend of Chardonnay, Meunier, and Pinot Noir. And to be fair, almost all of it is. But there are actually 9 grape varieties that are currently permitted for planting in Champagne. So you've got those 3, and you've also got these ancient ones like Arban and Petit Melier, Pinot Blanc, and then Fromenteau that is the same as Pinot Gris. And then, so that's 7. And then you've got 2 new ones. You've got this Voltis, which is this experimental peewee variety. So it's not actually officially part of the repertoire yet. It's in an experimentation phase until I think maybe 2033 or something like that, at which point I'll make a judgment on it. But anyway, that is currently permitted. And then the other one that is on the books is Chardonnay Rose. Now, all of these grape varieties together combine to be less than 1% of all Champagne's plantings. So it's really, really small. But it is an increasing part of the conversation and it adds quite an interesting element to some Champagne producers' repertoires. So there are people like Grape, who are one of the bigger ones, who really take, lots of this is down in the Côte de Bar. So Grape do it really, really well. And then people like Laherte, Frères that I'm going to try here. The third thing is the use of Solera systems, sometimes known here as perpetual reserves. And this makes a lot of sense when you think that most, at least non-vintage champagne, is essentially an exercise in blending, that this kind of makes a lot of sense in that context. So it functions in a very similar way to sherry, although actually it's probably even more simple. So basically a producer will create a reserve tank or a reserve barrel, and then every year some of that wine is removed for blending and a new vintage wine is then added to it. And so therefore that reserve contains multiple vintages simultaneously. And so over time, the reserve wine might include, 5, 10, 20 or more vintages. Now, famously, Philippona has had a perpetual reserve system since, I think, 1946. There are also other producers like Parma and Celos, and it's really interesting. The wines made like this are really, really interesting. So that's my third thing. So the fourth thing is about up-and-coming subregions. So Champagne is no longer all about the Côte de Blanc, the Montagne de Reims, and the Vallée de la Marne. And the Côte de Bar, which, has often been kind of like tacked onto the end of Champagne, the kind of periphery, largely because it is quite far removed from Reims and from Epernay. actually is now getting some really, really serious attention. It is regarded amongst Champagne's most exciting terroirs. And so you get regions like this one, Montgueux, that have even been referred to as the Montrachet of Champagne, because somebody said that once. I don't know. But it does produce these kind of like rich and expressive Chardonnays on this chalky outcrop that's really, really far removed from the Côte de Blanc. So if you get out of that traditional kind of fishhook zone that we maybe traditionally associate with Champagne, the quality of those wines has never been higher than it is right now. And then my final one is about the rise of still wines. So don't forget, Champagne is a region where still wines predate sparkling wines by 400 or more years. And I think there's a real opportunity here. And there are producers who are starting to take these still wines much more seriously than they historically have. And the reason for that is climate change. There are opportunities now. We all know that the world is getting warmer. Champagne, even though it's a cold region, is right on the frontier of climate change because you have to ferment the wine twice, right? So your second fermentation is going to add another 1.5% alcohol to the wine. So if you're picking your grapes and they're already 12.5% potential alcohol, you're going to end up with the Champagne at 13.5%, 14%, and nobody wants that. So the still wines may have more of a role to play in the future, because it's not inconceivable that basically that Champagne might become too hot for top quality fizz. And so enter the Coteaux Champenois. So Coteaux Champenois is the appellation that is there for still wines. But there are also other ones that are a little bit more niche, like the one I'm going to try here. This is a Rosé de Riceys. And this is produced exclusively in the village of Les Riceys in the Côte de Bar. And it has its own appellation that's separate from both Champagne and the Coteaux de Champenois. Sorry, Coteaux Champenois, not Coteaux de Champenois. And it's made entirely from Pinot Noir, and it's traditionally a Rosé de Saigne, and you can see the colour. It almost doesn't look like a rosé at all. So where there is contact with the skins for several days before pressing, and Rosé de Riceys particularly, I find quite exciting. This is one of the longest kind of surviving links to that pre-sparkling history. Apparently Louis XIV was a massive fan of this wine, and it's just a really nice example of kind of what's new is old. You know, what goes around comes around. Before we dive in, I want to talk about WSG membership. WSG membership brings together over 2,000 wine lovers from around the world, united by a passion for great wine. Our mission? To go beyond the textbook, exploring all the latest trends and developments across Europe's top vineyards and busting a few myths and stereotypes along the way. Members enjoy exclusive video content with expert interviews,
Marsanne, a little bit smoother, more kind of yellow fruity.
Tasting sessions with our in-house masters of wine. 2021 was an absolute shocker. Live monthly webinars and exclusive regional mini-series. You'll connect with fellow wine enthusiasts in our chat spaces and online tasting club, sharing wine tips, travel recs, and the odd lively debate. You'll also gain access to our groundbreaking producer guide, spotlighting the very best wines across France, Spain, Italy, and Germany, from the traditional, iconic estates to the new generation of talent snapping at their heels and writing the next chapters in the story of these regions. Plus, discounts on all our online certifications, priority booking on our industry-leading study tours, and a whole range of exclusive member perks. First of all, on the nose, there's no way on smelling this that I would know that it was 12 years old. It doesn't have. There's never been a more exciting time to join WSG membership. If you haven't signed up yet, well, you probably should. Join us now at winescholarguild.com/membership. Now let's get back to the video. All right, so this first wine is made by Olivier Horiot. It's a single vineyard on Barmont, Rosé de Riceys, 2019 vintage. It's properly it's really a quite obscure style of wine. There's not a lot of people making this style of wine. But I mean, Horiot is just a brilliant producer. He also does tremendous traditional method fizzy wines, some of which actually are made in Solera, which I'm going to talk about one of the other wines. Anyway, you can see from the colour, I mean, if I were to pour you a glass of that, I don't think that you would pick it as a rosé. I mean, I've had lots of Pinot Noirs, red Pinot Noirs that look that colour. But it is Pinot Noir. It's 100% Pinot Noir, and it's a fascinating wine. I'm just going to give you an idea of what it smells like. So, it's got this like really intense strawberry character, but wrapped in this shell of kind of low intervention, sort of slight funky wildness that is very nicely done and very appealing. It's got huge intensity. Again, like I guess coming from the depth of the color and the maceration and stuff. I don't know the exact winemaking process on here. Traditionally, Rosé de Riceys is Rosé de Saigne. I'm getting quite a carbonic nose on here. There is something that is really sort of juicy and jammy and fresh on here that to me indicates maybe there's some whole bunches as well. Let's give it a try though. So the palate of that wine is just an absolute joy. Like it's a big style of rosé, it's a gastronomic style, but flavor-wise, you just get this kind of like really pure, focused, wild strawberry character. And I mean wild strawberry as being sort of pretentiously saying strawberry. It is like those tiny strawberries that grow, that have that kind of like really tangy acidity as well. There's this lovely poise and balance and harmony in this wine. All the elements just work so well. But I think the thing that really sets it apart is its length of flavor. Like it just goes and goes and goes. For such a lightly structured wine, there's no tannin or anything like that. The way that palate evolves and it lasts and it lingers, it's really super. I think this wine is absolutely exceptional. If you like these, darker, like I say, more gastronomic styles of rosé, I think that you are really going to love this. It's kind of the antithesis of everything that's popular or in fashion with rosé at the moment, which I have to say only kind of adds to its appeal to me. But that is like a really exceptional example of a very historic style of wine. So that is Olivier Horiot's Barmont Rosé de Riceys from 2019. Okay, so second wine, I wanted to show you a producer that represents that more kind of lower intervention, naturally inclined winemaking. And so I picked this one. This is Jacques Lassaigne, Les Vins de Montgueux. So Montgueux is the sub-region village that I mentioned earlier as being the Montrachet of Champagne. So let's go straight into the wine and I'll tell you a bit more about it in a second. It's incredibly elegant, which, so is Montrachet, so maybe they are into something. It's incredibly elegant on the nose. There is this 100% Chardonnay. It has this kind of pure lemon curd citrus character that is so delicate and precise, and the lees work on here is really nicely done, just adding this kind of slight biscuitiness in the background and allowing that purity of fruit to shine through. It smells fantastic. So the winemaking on here is it does have some partial barrel vinification, and then it's low pressure during the second fermentation. Disgorgement à la volée, so by hand, so without freezing the neck of the bottle, and then it's bottled without sulfites and without dosage, so no sweetness added at the end. Let's give it a try. So it's just an incredibly sophisticated and elegant champagne. The acidity just cuts through rapier-like through the body of the wine, and it just allows, again, those kind of citrusy and appley characters to come through. The lees is really harmonious. It is just so perfectly poised and balanced, and the length on it is sublime. You wouldn't know it's low intervention from tasting it. There's nothing wild, nothing funky here. It's just an incredibly light and delicate and sophisticated champagne. It's absolutely brilliant. So that is Jacques Lassaigne, really great producer from a really up and coming village of Montgueux in the Coteaux. And then the third wine I picked kind of represents all that and more. So this is one of my favorite champagne producers ever. This is made by Laherte, Frères. It's called Les Sept. Because it uses all 7 grape varieties. So that's one thing. It's got the big 3, but then it's got these other ancient varieties. It's also lower intervention winemaking, but it also uses a Solera system of perpetual reserve. So it's got all sorts of things going on in this wine. So I'm going to go straight into it. I mean, on the nose, it smells absolutely incredible. It is a huge style of champagne. It's incredibly rich. If that one was all about kind of lightness and sophistication and poise and delicacy, this one has just got a big old smack round of nose of flavour. I mean, there's so much going on. It's also much more distinctly oxidative. It's not oxidized, but oxidative on the nose. So the way that this wine is made is that they blend all of these 7 indigenous grape varieties, multiple vintages through a Solera system that was initiated in 2005, so over 20 years old now. They had, I think it was 7 old Burgundy barrels that form the foundation, and then reserve wines are drawn off it annually and then combined with the wines of the current year, which make up 40% of the blend. And you really do get that kind of oxidative character as a result of that very, very long aging of these reserve wines. So it's kind of nutty and it's kind of toasty, and the lees is a lot more intense on this one than it was on the last one. Let's give it a try though. Wow, I mean, it's so intense on the palate. It's a huge style of champagne. Again, that kind of rich, fat, kind of oxidative character coming through. All 7 grape varieties in here. I like a whole man's up and tell you, I cannot taste that there are 7 grape varieties in here. You might be able to, but I mean, it's incredibly well balanced. Again, that signature champagne acidity, so you can get away with that kind of fatness and that richness when you've got that acidity that just cuts through the wine in the way that it does. And then you've got this incredibly intense lees that's almost coming through as this kind of like marmite-y character, which I've just realized at least probably 50% of you watching will have no idea what I'm talking. But if you know, then you know about Marmite. It does have that kind of like Marmite, yeast extract, Bovril, kind of Vegemite, if you're from Australia, that kind of character. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just this incredibly dark lees character, really, really toasty and bready and yeasty. And the finish, the way the finish evolves on this is just remarkable. Like the intensity of fruit through that leesiness. The flavor that I've now gotten on the palate is this kind of like toasted almond, again, this kind of oxidative character that just lingers and evolves, and that is just an absolutely smashing champagne. So that's it. They're my 3 wines that really kind of represent the frontiers of winemaking in Champagne. I always think it's interesting to look at these because you can kind of predict the future by looking at what these producers right at the extremities are doing. All of those 3 wines are absolutely fantastically made, is the first thing to say. We've got this one that represents this growing trend towards still wines. This is Rosé de Riceys, but also Coteaux Champenois. We've got a growing trend towards more sustainability and lower intervention in the winery and in the vineyard. And then we've got this wine that kind of represents a whole load of stuff. Interesting historic grape varieties back on the rise. We've got this Solera system, perpetual aging system that's becoming quite fashionable. If you've tried any of these wines, I would love to know what you think about them. Or actually, if you've got any of your own recommendations for wines that kind of are outliers or lie on the frontiers of winemaking in the way that these do, that you think are particularly successful, then please just let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys so you can get involved in the comments. But that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll really look forward to seeing you guys next time.